Okay. Alright guys, I found a new spot for my intro, so I hope you like this one. I love it here. It's a bit of a hike away from where I live. The weather's beautiful today, sun is about to set soon as well. Still quite warm outside, I could take my coat off and it's about 10 degrees Celsius. Anyway, we're here to watch episode number 3 of the Low Poly Racer, and I hope you've enjoyed the journey so far. And I've got a lot of comments that we should do some stuff in Unity, and finally we're going to be able to jump into Unity, and we're going to add the wheels onto the car and have those roll around. And we're going to be using the built-in wheel colliders that Unity has already, and we'll have add some rear torque to the wheel so we can have some rear wheel drive. Always nice if you want to do some power sliding, and we'll add some front steering because usually you want that in the front pretty much. It's going to be a little bit of C# scripting, but don't worry too much. It's nothing fancy, nothing too detailed. So just tag along. I'll kept everything in normal speed so you can look at what I'm typing and all my typos and everything like that. Oh yeah, we have to alter the center of gravity a little bit as well, because the cars tumble over quite easily. So we can fix that by setting a transform that we can configure where the center of gravity should be for the cars. And that'll counterbalance it a little bit so it doesn't roll over. Also, you'll find that the car drives a little bit slow so far because it's applying real-world physics into a scaled-down game, and usually you want to speed things up, so that's something we're going to do in the next video. But for now, let's get the cars rolling, driving, steering, and jumping even. You can do that. So let's get started. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is to add some wheels, and we've dragged the wheel object or the wheel mesh into the hierarchy here. Right-click on it and do unpack prefab completely. We don't really need it to have a prefab link anymore. And now that it's in the scene or in the hierarchy, we make the wheel collider a child of the car. So just drag and drop the wheel onto the car and that'll create a child there, or move it to become a child. And then reposition it using the transform slider here, and then just have it match pretty good into the wheel well of the car. You can click on this little gizmo up on the right, and especially on that little text there where it says left, and just click on that one once and that'll switch it into isometric view here. And then now it's going to be a little bit easier to position the wheel into the correct place. So just tweak it a little bit until you're happy with that one. Okay, now we've got to export the track from Blender if you haven't done that already. And it follows the same principle as we did in the previous video. I won't go into detail here, but make sure that you get the settings correct like we did in the last video, so you got all the scale and rotations correctly. It was saved into the assets folder, which is great because Unity automatically imports it that way. Okay, we drag the track into the hierarchy or into the scene view itself, and then what you can do is just expand it, but right click and do unpack prefab completely again. Select the child objects and then go into the mesh renderer and drag the common material onto element 0 of the mesh renderer. That'll get the colors correct. Then you can select the child objects again and drag them into the root, and then delete the track parent. We don't really need that one anymore. Okay, it's looking pretty good so far here. We've got everything in place. Now we need to position the camera. So just align the scene view the way you want it to be. Select the camera and go to Game Object Align with View. That's the same as pressing Ctrl+Shift+F. And that'll align that camera into the view that we want for the game. Time has come to create our first script. So let's create a new folder in the Assets folder called Scripts. We want to keep things tidy here. Go into the scripts folder, right click and do create C# script, and then name that one car. Double click on it to get into Visual Studio if that's what you're using. And now we're going to start typing some things. So we want to reference some variables here. So let's do public wheel collider, and let's name this one wheel collider left front, semicolon, always end with that. Control+C when you've marked that one, and Control+V to paste it into 401s. We need 4 wheels, and then just rename them so it's right front, and then left back and right back as well. So we've got the 4 wheel colliders referenced here. We also need to reference the transforms themselves of the wheels. So do public transform wheel left front. And now for some real magic. Hold the Alt key and you can select across multiple lines and rename multiple lines at the same time. We're going to name them wheel left front, wheel right front, wheel left back, and wheel right back. Ctrl+S to save, and then Alt-Tab back into Unity. Now we've got to add the car script to the car. So select the car and click on Add Component in the inspector and type car. You can also drag and drop the script itself onto the car actually. Next thing we need to do is highlight the car and do create empty, and let's do some organization here. So we'll name that one wheels, and then we'll reposition the wheel into that subfolder, you could call it. It's a parent object, so we have it nice and neat. Rename that one wheel left front, press Ctrl+D to duplicate it and call it wheel right front. And now we can change the position here on the X axis, so it moves it into the right side of the car. And now we have a wheel on each side of the car. It's always good. We also need to rotate the wheel 180 degrees on the Y-axis because it was facing inwards before. Then we duplicate the wheels again and create all four wheels, so we call it left back and right back. And then we have to mark those two and slide them back into their correct position on the back of the car. We can reposition them as well. You can do the same trick as before if you want to align them perfectly by going into the isometric side view. Now we create another empty here, and let's call that one transforms, because these that we created now are what's called the transforms, or we refer to them as that because it's the visual representation of the wheel. Create a new child object as well and call that one wheel colliders, because that's going to be the parent for our wheel colliders. And then create another empty and name that one wheel collider left front. Now go to add component in the inspector and type wheel collider, and let's add that one. We can keep the settings pretty much default, and as you can see, you can't really see the wheel collider in the scene now. Usually you can see that as a green circle, and that's because it doesn't have a rigid body yet. But I duplicated it and called it wheel collider right front, and changed to positive on the x-axis again, and now we had two wheel colliders there, but we still can't really see them yet. Even if we change the radius here, nothing changes in the scene. So we can fix that then by going to the parent object, the copy car or whatever you've called yours, and then do add component and then type in rigid body here. And when you've added that one, you can see in the left side there that the wheel collider appeared. It's a little bit too big so far, but at least it's there now. Okay, we're also going to add some colliders. So right click on the copy car there and create a new game object called colliders. And now we can add a component and type in box collider. We use primitive box colliders instead of mesh colliders because mesh colliders are really expensive to use in terms of performance, and we definitely don't need that precision right now. So when we've added the box collider, you can resize it using the X, Y, and Z there. So I stretch it a little bit on the X-axis, and then I resize it on the on the X-axis to make it a little bit wider, and then also squash it a little bit with the Y-axis there. And just keep it roughly in shape now. We're just gonna make sure that it works. We can reposition it a little bit to make sure that it's looking pretty good there. And then we need to add a second collider for the upper part of the car. And we can do that one by just adding another box collider to the same component. You could also create another child object. Unity will treat that as compounded colliders anyway, but I kept mine in the same one here, and then I just repositioned it for the upper part of the car chassis. Again, you don't have to be picky about this, just get it into the rough shape. You won't really notice it anyway. It just makes sure that the car rolls properly when it flips over to the roof and things like that. So good enough, that'll do the trick. Okay, that looks pretty good. That should be enough for the colliders. Let's go back into the wheel colliders now and get them into the right size. Select the left front wheel collider and then just change the radius here to something that looks pretty suitable. If you know the exact radius of your wheel, you could type that in, of course. I didn't really remember at all what I modeled mine in during my 10-minute modeling video there. So I had to do some testing by just resizing the radius a little bit to make sure it looked pretty decent at least. And then you have to reposition it as well, so it's looking at the, so it's in the center of the wheel. So I just slide it up a little bit on the Y-axis, and that should match pretty good. And then I'll reduplicate that one actually, because now that I've done the tweaking, I duplicate it and call it right front. And then I need to do the X position there again and take away the negative sign, and that'll position it on the equal side, on the right side of the car. All right, let's duplicate those two and do the same for the back wheels here. So we'll call it left back and right back, and they're the same size and everything, but we do need to reposition them on the Z axis, which is the back and forth axis there. So look from the side view again and try to get it to match up properly with the wheels. You could also reposition them using, copy the information from the wheel objects themselves as well. That'll probably give you a bit of a more exact position, but I just positioned them manually like this. Okay, click back on the car, and now we need to drag those references to the variables that we created. So we manually drag each of the transform and each of the wheel collider into the corresponding variable that we mapped earlier into our script. Okay, now that the references are done, we need to go back into our cars script here. So switch back into Visual Studio or your IDE of your choice. We're going to create a couple of new variables here. So do public float motor torque equals 100F, and also public float max steer equals 20F. We do them public because then we expose them in the inspector so we can change them. Then let's get rid of those methods and create a new method called fixed update. That's the physics update loop that Unity has. And then let's type wheel collider left back dot motor torque equals input dot get axis vertical in quotation mark times motor torque. This way we'll apply the motor torque by pressing the up axis, up and down arrows on the keyboard in this case, and we'll apply those to the left and back, to the left and right back wheels. Now the car just flew out of sight, and that's because it only weighs 1 kilogram, so we have to increase the mass of the rigid body of the game object to 500, I put on this one. And now when you press play, it'll move forward and it'll start to drive. It's a bit slow because we don't apply a lot of torque at this point, only 100. So we can speed that up later on. And it also goes a little bit funky with the view because we're still in isometric view, isometric. So we'll swap that back into perspective. Okay, we've got our car wheeling, but the wheels are actually sliding. We need to fix that now because we can't really have sliding wheels. And to fix that, let's add the update method back into the script. And that's the default mono behavior that runs every frame. And let's create a new temporary variable called pos, and then equals vector3.0, and then var rot equals quaternion.identity. We need to define those because we're going to get those out of a method here. Then you type wheel collider left front dot get world pose, and then within brackets out pos, comma out rot. And now we do wheel left front dot position equals pos, and wheel left front dot rotation equals rot. That'll grab the wheel collider's information for the position and rotation and put that onto the transform so they reflect what the wheel collider is behaving like. Let's copy and paste those, and for the right front, we'll just retype that one and use the Alt key to multi-select the lines here. Rename that one to right front, and then we have to compensate here and do, for the rotation, multiply that by quaternion.euler, if I can type it, and within brackets 0.180.0, and that means that it's going to rotate it 180 degrees on the y-axis. If you remember correctly, we flipped the wheel itself to get the outward side of the wheel facing outwards, and I have to compensate for that when we copy the world pose to on both of the right wheels here, so they have they're facing outwards correctly. And then just do that for all the wheels, make sure everything is in place there. Rename them properly as well to get the front, back, and the left, right correct here. Okay, so we've got the wheels rolling now. The transforms or the mesh renders of the wheels are reflecting to what the wheel colliders are doing pretty good now. So we've got our forward and backwards motion here. The car is still sunk into the ground a little bit, so we'll have to fix that. So select the track now and do add component and add a mesh collider. This one has to be a mesh collider. You can't really use a primitive since we've got some details like the curbs and hills and things like that. And now when we press play, the car will be actually rolling onto that mesh that we just added instead, so the track mesh collider. And it looks pretty good here. We've got the wheels rolling over the curve there quite nicely. And you can test it a little bit to make sure that everything's covered, but we'll get out of play mode for now here. And let's make the car be able to steer now. So go back into the script, and in the fixed update under the motor torque stuff, we add a wheel collider left front dot steer angle equals input dot get axis and then horizontal within quotation marks, and then multiply that one by max steer, and then do the same for the right front wheel as well. And this way we'll take the left and right arrow keys by default in Unity, and we'll have it steer the car left and right depending on it'll reach the max steer angle of 20 degrees. Now if we switch back into Unity and press play and then use left and right on your keyboard, and you can see that the front wheels are now steering, and that'll automatically work. The car will be able to steer left and right here. That's great. It's still moving quite slowly, but we can now drive around with the motor torque, pushing the car forward on the rear wheels, and we can steer left to go left and right to go right. Surprise. Okay, so the car is a little bit slow, so let's get out of play mode and select the car, and then go into the car script there and increase motor torque to 300, and let's try to play now as well. So we can I changed the display here a bit so I can see a bit of a wider angle, and then I just change the main camera a little bit to cover the viewport so we can see correctly when it comes driving here. Then we press play again and use the up arrow on the keyboard, and then it's hiding under the bridge there, but it's coming out and it's going faster, but we've got an issue here. Got some serious two-wheeling going on here, and no matter how much you try, even at slow speeds, the car will tumble over, and that's a real problem. You don't really want to have the game like that. So let's go back into the script now, and at the top add some room there and do public transform center of mass. So we're going to have a reference to a game object or a transform that we can use as a center of mass. And then we add a private variable as well, and it's going to be a rigid body type, and then call it _ rigid body. I use the underscore because the rigid body name is sort of reserved from Unity. Then we add the start method back, the default mono behavior that runs at startup. And then we do rigid body equals get component, and we don't really do center of mass because there's no such component. So we fix that and do what we want to do is get component rigid body. If you spotted that, good job. Then we do _ rigid body again dot center of mass equals center of mass dot local position, and that'll set the rigid body's center of mass to whatever we've specified in terms of the transform. Now switch back to Unity, and under the cop car here, let's create a new game object and call it center of mass. And now you can just reposition that one either by typing in the details or using the sliders or in the scene view. Just reposition it to where you want the center of mass, and I keep mine pretty much at the bottom of the car. And then drag the reference into the script as well, and then press play again. And now when the car drives, we should be able to make this corner a little bit better. It's not driving very fast, but still at least it doesn't flip over like it did before we made that center of mass tweak. But we wouldn't really clear this jump even if we tried it. Okay, that's going to be the end of episode 3, and for episode 4 next time we'll increase the speed so you can clear that jump a little bit, and it'll make it a little bit more fun to drive altogether. And then we'll import those trees and decorate the track a little bit. We'll also add the tire barriers that you can hit into so you don't fly off out of the corners. And then we'll add some camera movement as well. We have to have the camera panning along as you drive. It'll make it a lot more stylish and fun as well, and you'll zoom in a little bit closer to the track. And then we'll add some fences and do some obstacles. And the nice things about those fences are that we're going to use some fixed joints there, so you can bump into them slightly and they'll keep you on track. But if you go into them hard, you slam into them, they'll break loose and send you off track. Alright everyone, I hope you liked this video, and if you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. It'll help me out a lot, and share it as well, and subscribe if you want to see the next episode. I'm gonna have a lot of fun making this game, and soon I'll be able to have you play it as well in a browser, and you can even download it probably as well. And then we'll see what sort of a lap time you can score in the game as well. Take care everyone, and I'll see you soon again.